The grand first-class cabin fell still when the flight attendant blocked Sophia's way. "Ma'am, there must be some error. This section is only for first-class travelers." The piercing gazes of wealthy passengers stabbed at Sophia as her valid ticket was openly questioned. No one imagined that in moments Eduardo Vasquez, billionaire, Sophia's loyal husband and principal owner of this airline, would appear and overturn the power dynamic in this cabin filled with quick judgments. Sophia. Mendez adjusted the watch on her wrist, a gift from her husband reminding her of their first encounter. At 35, her modest yet graceful dress contrasted sharply with the glittering jewelry and designer outfits that crowded the boarding line. The first-class cabin of Stellar Airways gleamed with spacious leather seats, flawless attendants, and the scent of freshly poured champagne. Eduardo had insisted she enjoy this trip alone as a reward for the charity event she had arranged. "You deserve every bit of luxury," he had said, before being called to an urgent meeting. He promised to join her at the resort hours later. Sophia inhaled deeply and handed her first-class ticket to the attendant. It was time to allow herself a taste of luxury she often avoided, despite being married to one of the wealthiest men in the country. "I'm sorry, but this area is only for first class." "Guess," declared Camilla Reynolds, the head attendant, her gaze scanning Sophia's simple dress, her tone cut like a blade. Tall and impeccably styled, Camilla's blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, her crisp navy uniform adorned with gold stripes she wore as marks of superiority rather than duty. "I do have a first-class ticket," Sophia said calmly, offering her boarding pass. Camilla accepted it with her fingertips as though avoiding contamination, her manicured nails glittering under the lights. "It seems there's some mistake," she replied, eyebrows arched in doubt. "Perhaps you were wrongly entered in the system." She exaggeratedly studied the pass, her lips pursed with false suspicion. A man in an expensive suit lowered his paper, his gold cufflinks catching the light. "Happens all the time," he remarked loudly. "Economy is getting too full these days." Several passengers glanced up, some with hidden smirks, others curious. A couple in designer outfits whispered, their eyes flicking to Sophia's modest attire. Camilla smiled with false sympathy, her bright teeth flashing. "Let me check if there's space for you in the back. I'm sure you'll be more comfortable there." The stress on comfortable was a clear insult. "You don't belong here." Sophia's cheeks warmed, but she held her composure. "Please check again. My husband bought this seat for me." Her voice stayed steady, strengthened by her own years as a flight attendant. "Your husband?" scoffed a woman wearing a diamond necklace like a grape. She laughed lightly. "Darling, everyone says that when they want an upgrade. Next you'll say he's a CEO or something." Discreet laughter spread through the cabin as Camilla exchanged knowing looks with her crew. Sophia touched the watch Eduardo had gifted her the day they met, when she too was a flight attendant. The cool metal steadied her, reminding her of simpler times and giving her courage. She had faced bias before, but never expected it from colleagues in a profession she once loved. Nearby, a businessman tapped his armrest. "Some of us have meetings. Can this be resolved so we can leave?" Camilla stiffened, her smile still false. "Please wait here while I resolve this issue. Perhaps it's better if you wait outside the gate until it's cleared." Her tone left no choice. Sophia felt humiliation, indignation, and rising anger. She could easily reveal she was Eduardo Vasquez's wife, major shareholder of Stellar Airways. One word would change everything. But why should she need his name for respect? The cabin manager approached, his expression serious beneath his hat. "Ma'am, there appears to be a problem with your reservation. I'll need to ask you to step off the aircraft while we confirm." His voice was professional yet final, leaving no room for argument. The mix of pity and disdain from the other passengers weighed on her. A jeweled woman in her 60s clicked her tongue. A young executive behind his laptop hid a smirk. Sophia stood firm, her voice soft but unwavering. "My ticket is valid. I have every right to sit here." Camilla's smile tightened. "Security. Rules, ma'am. We can't allow just anyone in first class without proper verification. Just anyone." The words hung heavy with insult. At that instant, the cabin door opened again. With deliberate precision, the commanding figure of Eduardo Vasquez appeared, 6'2", broad-shouldered. His very presence demanded attention. His flawless navy Tom Ford suit, tailored to perfection, contrasted with his calm, assured posture. Silver strands at his temples lent distinction to his otherwise dark, executive haircut, a style that spoke of influence without excess. The cabin froze. Eduardo's piercing blue eyes, keen and assessing, swept the space before fixing on Sophia as she faced the staff. His expression stayed composed, yet the faint narrowing around his eyes signaled a storm of restrained fury beneath. Sophia. Eduardo's deep, steady voice filled the cabin. Is there an issue? Camilla and the manager exchanged anxious glances, their earlier confidence dissolving. Sir, we're only resolving a small seating matter, the manager replied, his tone suddenly deferential, his posture shifting to accommodate this unexpected presence. Eduardo advanced down the aisle with the slow certainty of a man who owned not only the aircraft, but the very space around it. Each step carried deliberate weight, passengers instinctively leaning back as he passed. That's my wife's seat, isn't it? 2A? His accent carried a faint trace of Spanish, giving his words a melodic edge that softened yet reinforced their authority. Your wife? Camilla repeated, the color draining from her face like water from a shattered vessel. A whisper rippled through the cabin, charged and immediate. Eduardo reached Sophia's side, his hand resting gently at the small of her back, a gesture both protective and possessive. The luxury watch on his wrist glimmered faintly, not gaudy, but unmistakably valuable to those who recognize such things. Yes, Sofia Mendez Vasquez, my wife. Has there been a problem with her seating? Though spoken politely, the question carried the weight of command. The manager faltered. Mr. Vasquez, we had no idea. We were simply following procedure to confirm. Confirm what, exactly? Eduardo cut in, his eyes cold and unyielding, moving deliberately between the manager and Camila, holding each in place. Whether she deserves first class based on her appearance? The silence that followed was absolute as realization spread of who he was and the scale of their error. Mr. Vasquez, we didn't know, Camilla stammered, her face now pale as chalk, the arrogance drained completely away. Her badge trembled on her uniform, gold pins glinting with every shake. Sweat formed along her hairline, threatening the perfection of her makeup. Though Eduardo had not raised his voice or made a threatening move, his presence filled the cabin, and the power dynamic shifted in an instant. At 45, he embodied the quiet certainty of a man who had built an empire from nothing, not by inheritance but through intellect and relentless resolve. Clearly, he replied, the single word landing like a judgment. His gaze swept the scene. Those blue eyes, once described by a business magazine as able to cut through any facade. He noticed everything. Sophia's faint slump of embarrassment despite her effort to stand tall, the wide-eyed stares of passengers, some already typing frantically on their phones, and the crew's abrupt shift from authority to submission, in seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but iron-laden. Did you know before we married Sophia was the youngest chief attendant in Stellar Airways history? His hand remained at her back, protective. She understands protocol and service better than anyone here combined. A hushed sigh passed through the seats. The woman with the diamond necklace now buried herself in the in-flight magazine, twisting her wedding ring nervously. The businessman who had grumbled about delays suddenly studied the floor. She once averted a mid-air emergency by recognizing a passenger's symptoms before he himself realized the danger, Eduardo continued, a trace of pride in his otherwise measured tone. She saved his life. The airline gave her a commendation that still hangs in headquarters, though I wonder if anyone here has seen it. Camila's skin turned ashen. The manager tugged at his collar, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. Eduardo's voice stayed level. I asked for this flight to wait for me because I wanted to surprise my wife. It appears I arrived at just the right moment. The pause before right moment echoed as a subtle warning. He turned to the manager, who now clutched his hat before him like a shield. As majority shareholder of Stellar Airways, I am gravely concerned about what I have witnessed today. The phrase majority shareholder fell like a silent bomb in the cabin. A passenger by the window audibly gasped. Camila leaned against a seat to stay upright, her knuckles white against the leather. "Mr. Vasquez," the manager began, his voice cracking. "I assure you, this was just an isolated mistake." Eduardo lifted his hand. The simple gesture silenced him instantly. Misunderstandings always have consequences, don't they? Eduardo's tone was calm, almost conversational, yet the hidden warning was unmistakable. He pulled out his phone and typed swiftly, every movement sharp and deliberate. "I've just emailed the board. Starting tomorrow, every Stellar Airways employee will undergo mandatory anti-discrimination training." His piercing gaze locked onto Camila. "Miss Reynolds, you'll have the honor of being the very first participant." Camila's throat tightened. Her entire career flashed before her eyes. The silver wings pin she had once worn with so much pride now felt unbearably heavy on her chest. Eduardo then turned to the manager. "As for the position of Director of Customer Experience we've been discussing, I believe my wife, with both her previous service in this company and her recent experience as a customer, is perfectly qualified to take over, if she wishes." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. This was the first time she had heard of such a role. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she composed herself again. Eduardo then addressed the passengers, his voice carrying clearly through the cabin without ever needing to rise. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. As compensation, champagne will be complimentary for the entire flight." Then, lowering his voice just enough for those nearby to still catch it, he added for Camila, "Please ensure my wife receives proper attention throughout the flight. Your future with this company depends on it." Camila nodded silently, her empire of arrogance crumbling in full view of the cabin. In mere minutes, she had transformed from a figure of false authority into a humbled servant. She quickly stepped back and motioned for the other attendants to begin service. The irony was not lost on anyone. The businessmen who had earlier dismissed Sophia now regarded her with new respect, not only for Eduardo's power, but for her unwavering dignity through the entire ordeal. At the luxury beachfront resort that evening, Sophia and Eduardo shared a glass of wine on the private balcony of their suite. The setting sun bathed the ocean in shades of gold. The flight, after the dramatic confrontation, had continued in tense silence. Camila avoiding Sophia's eyes as she served her with almost painful deference. "You always did know how to make an entrance," Sophia said with a small smile. Eduardo chuckled softly. "Not quite the reunion I planned," he admitted, taking her hand. "But I'll confess, it was satisfying to see their expressions." Sophia gazed out at the horizon. "You know, for years I avoided using your name or status. I wanted to be recognized for my own merits, not as Mrs. Vasquez. And you achieved that," Eduardo replied firmly. "The charity gala you organized raised more money for underprivileged children than any other in the Foundation's history." Still, Sophia hesitated, brushing her fingers over the watch he had given her years ago. "Sometimes I miss my independence. The career I was building." Eduardo studied her face for a moment. "That's why I created the position of Director of Customer Experience. It isn't a favor, Sophia. There's simply no one more qualified." She blinked, startled. "You planned this before the incident on the plane?" Eduardo smiled gently. "It was meant to be your anniversary gift. You have the experience, the vision, and now after today you know exactly what needs to change." Sophia felt tears gathering in her eyes. "You never stopped believing in me, even when I doubted myself." Eduardo touched the watch on her wrist. "Remember what I told you when I gave you this? That time is the only true luxury, how we choose to spend it, and with whom." She nodded, recalling the young businessman she had once served coffee to in first class. "That flight attendant," Eduardo continued, "taught me more about dignity and excellence in 3 hours than I learned in years of boardroom meetings. I didn't fall in love with Mrs. Vasquez, the billionaire's wife. I fell in love with Sofia Mendez, the woman who treated everyone, from a CEO to a child traveling alone, with the same respect. Sophia squeezed his hand, the sunset reflecting off the watch that marked not just passing hours, but the journey they had shared together. "So tell me," Eduardo asked softly, "what does the future director of customer experience think about transforming Stellar Airways?" Sophia smiled, lighter than she had felt in years. "I think it's time for a new chapter." "So, what did you think of this unexpected twist? Did Eduardo's reveal as the airline's true owner surprise you as much as it shocked that arrogant crew?" Sadly, in real life, many people are judged daily by appearance, clothes, or background, without anyone knowing their true worth. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a similar situation? Share your story in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales like this one. Activate the bell icon so you never miss our next release. And remember, never judge by appearances. True value always lies beyond what the eyes can see.